But you wanted to talk a little bit about the dad's best gimmicks and angles. You thought,
Gimmicks, angles,
yeah.
pretty much anything you'd like to discuss.
Let's start off his best angle ever. What do you think?
Well, I'll let you go first.
Well, I would say, that everybody would say that it was the one he started. He laid the groundwork for it was when he brought the Freebirds here. When he brought the Freebirds to world class, and
Basically gave Ken a job for 3 years.
that like
Mhm.
started the whole Freebird Von Erich angle.
Mhm.
And Dad brought him in. Then they shot the thing Christmas night '82.
Mhm.
And the rest is history. So I mean,
And Dad was history after that.
yeah,
Basically, some guys booked their own divorce. Dad booked his own demise.
yeah. So, uh, other things that he had a hand in that I thought was great. Was I don't know. I'm sure knowing how Dad was, he had a lot to say about anything he did.
That's the Dusty turn. He was Bill Watts and Eddie Graham, but as Bill had told me before, Dad was his strong right arm. He goes, I leaned on your father heavily during that time. That's why Dust would call Eddie Graham was his guide, but Dad was his mentor. So Dad was heavily involved in that one too. Because Dad, I mean, most of the time back then, and it's not like it is now where it's just a different thing. Most of the time, the guys involved in it were the guys, they had a lot to say in what they did, and that's the way Dad always booked. He wanted the guys to have a say in what they were doing, because if you have a say in the angle and in the program, you're going to work harder to get it over. You ask the guys, what would you like to try to do here? I mean, because like Shawn Michaels said,
right there.
like Shawn Michaels said, eventually, when the guys are out there in the ring, you got to give them the will and let them drive.
Right.
And those are the best bookers too. And like the greatest actors say, they like being directed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and they have to, like it's not just all one guy.
Yeah. You talk about. You talk about guys that want to be directed.
Mhm.
Do you think Chris Adams wanted to be directed?
Yes,
Do you think he did?
yes, and that's why I think that was Dad's best angle.
Okay.
Surpassed the Freebirds. I mean, come on, let's think of this.
I was going to say after the Freebirds, I was going to
Oh,
say
that was far better.
Dad. Well, how much did Dad like? So you talked
That's
about.
why Dad was brought back here.
I know. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. People don't know that.
Well,
go ahead.
Fritz
I'm like, I know.
Everybody knows Dad left here at the end of '82 over a difference.
Everybody knows. Yes.
And
that's in the
encyclopedia. It really wasn't over a payoff. It was about hurt feelings. Like when Jimmy Johnson said when he left here, it was because Jerry Jones had said that 500 other coaches could coach the team, and Jimmy said it hurt him. And when Dad got that payoff that he didn't think was fair, he just felt he was heartbroken. That's mainly why he left.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like for anybody who is interested in that, yeah, I do too. I think it was more like a personal thing. Like like
of course
you said,
it was.
feelings.
I mean, he was always able to tell guys to put aside their personal feelings, and he could get them to do that. He just never could.
Mm.
I mean, he could talk other guys in off the ledge, just not himself. And even when he was the booker, and Dad was strange when it came to booking, because a lot of times there'd be certain bookers that would acquiesce to anything that a promoter would say. Dad was one of those kind of guys that his mentality was, until I'm no longer doing it, I am doing it. And sometimes promoters would tell him, stop doing this and stop doing that. And if it was working, he normally did whatever it was he wanted to do until he was told he was no longer doing it. Because Barnett had to call Mom a few times in '75 and said, would you please tell him to quit coming to the office? He's been fired.
But you were talking about Chris Adams, the reason why we came back here.
That was Dad's best angle.
Okay.
Because number one, Fritz had no confidence in Ken to be able to reestablish anything. Fritz saw that the Freebird thing had run its course because they were already on their way out of here. Fritz had called Dad back numerous times between '82 and '84 to try to see if he wanted to come back. And he called him back in. He said, I want you to keep, and everyone knows the story. Fritz had misgivings about Ken. He goes, I need you to come back in and keep an eye on Ken and keep an eye on Kevin and Kerry. And I got this kid here named Chris Adams. I think I'd like to turn him heel. And when you think about how Dad did that, as Chris even said in a meeting one time, he was, the greatest thing that I ever learned from Gary was preparation, knowing what you're going to do next, and logic, things like that. But the reason I think it was Dad's best angle is, number one, Kabuki was hot here. Bruiser Brody was hot here. And then the Freebird thing, which everyone is still so in love with, was tremendously hot here. So Dad was following himself. And that's very difficult to do when you follow yourself. And also, strip this down. It wasn't green mist. It wasn't Confederate robes. It was something that was very subtle. It was basically two guys that wanted to beat each other to a bloody pulp.
Yeah.
It was a lot of lines of Steve Austin and Bret Hart. Just two guys that didn't like each other, and over something very simple. It was off and running, and it spawned into something else too.
Yeah.
That's why I think it was by far, and it sucked everybody in because it's easy to. It would have been so easy to blame Dad for it. Say, "Oh, Gary is the reason Chris turned heel," but most people were looking at things. I'm sure Gary has something to do with it. That's why it was very subtle. Remember when Dad just backed away and asked Chris if he wanted to come with him, and Chris was the one that led Dad out of the ring? The fans knew, okay, that was Chris that decided to do that. So he followed himself, and that's always tremendously difficult to do. He followed himself not once but twice.
Yeah, this is just for the thing, the fan club. You really think that
was better than the Freebirds?
No.
Yes.
I'm saying, like, I don't know if it's Dad following himself. He laid the groundwork for the Freebird.
But he's the one that booked the thing.
I know, but he didn't like book it for the year and a half that it had to run.
But I mean, it's once something is off and running, it's
right.
pretty. I mean, you don't really have. I mean, you could have thrown darts.
Right.
With that.
Yeah.
The only way, and that program.
I'm just trying to get something going for the.
And the only thing that would have been different had Dad stayed here with that is, I know they touched on it a little bit, but the only real difference would have been is the program between Brody and Gordy would have been more involved. Because Dad said I had 3 Freebirds, and I also had to have another opponent for Bruiser Brody. So that's pretty much, it wouldn't have looked that much different. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much how it was going to go. But I mean, the Freebird thing was great. But I think when you follow yourself, that's the hardest thing to do in wrestling. And Dad did it. So I would have to say Chris Adams and Kevin Von Erich was probably his best angle that he ever shot, that he was ever truly involved in, because he was brought back to do that. Exactly.
So Dad's best gimmick. I know I got mine, or I think it's probably going to drive you through the roof.
Why would that drive me through the roof? I
still think Dad's best creation was Kenji. I mean, that now that I say that, and I was only alive for 11 years of his career. So I mean, he had a 20-year career before I was even born. And so I was born in '79. So I don't even really have any memories until early '80s. But anyway,
until Vince decided to screw Bret, I think that really hasn't been talked about much either. I think that's one thing that's.
And today is the anniversary, as we were filming this, is the anniversary of the Montreal Screwjob.
That topic is so seldom we ever talked about.
Yeah, I'd like to get into that.
I'm sure, because not many people have talked about it.
But I think Dad's best work was, Chris Adams wasn't really his gimmick, but the way he took him under his wing and got him over and directed everything. But anyway, as far as Dad's creations, Muda. What about you? Wait, who do you think?
It would either be Uncle Donald.
That's a spoiler.
And here's the reason I say that is Uncle Donald, Don Jardine, the spoiler, had been in wrestling for several years and had been lied to and jerked around by promoters. And he gained Dad's trust. And he was a mild-mannered, handsome guy. And the type of guy that children and animals would always run to. And if you had a flat tire, he looked like a guy you would come to and say, "Mister, can you help me?" But you put the mask on him, he now looks like an assassin. And then you put a glove on him, now we really got something. And he was really the one that made Dad a successful, person in wrestling, because people started to listen to him. They're like, "Oh, if he can control him, And he also was the guy that made Fritz a successful promoter. And Fritz really started to listen to Dad when they put the spoiler gimmick on Uncle Donald. So I would say 1 would be Uncle Donald, and 2, it's hard to argue with Kabuki.
Yeah.
Because because Japanese guys had always been presented as like the Tojo style and throwing the salt. Now this was completely different, because by this point in time, everything that was American pop culture was from Japan. VCRs, cars, Walkmans, Benihana, Hibachis, whatever it was, video games was all coming from Japan, and we were taking something traditional Japanese and making it so rather than it wasn't the kamikaze style. And the war had been over for 40 years, not 40, for close to it by that point in time. This was 1981, and a lot of that stuff we stumbled upon, and I think that probably Uncle Donald and Kabuki were that would be his signature, because if there is no Kabuki, there is no Muda. And I thought that the Muda gimmick, he was reluctant to do it, but he finally did do it. I personally don't like the way it ended. I
Right.
think under the circumstances that he was having to work under, it was amazing that he got over that as well as it did. But I just
I,
I mean that was a great gimmick. It got over. It made a lot of money, but it should have lasted longer. I think it ended wrong.
yeah, I remember just being scared of Kabuki as
Oh
a
yeah,
little kid.
yeah. I remember the first time I ever met him. He was in line. He was in front of us at the line at the bank, and he was driving this red, maroon, burgundy Cadillac.
The Great Kabuki drove.
Yeah, he drove. He drove. What do you think? He pulled a rickshaw to the bank,
Yeah.
and he came out. He saw Dad was behind him, and he comes up. Oh, get us on, get us on. And I
What?
know who it
So
is.
yeah, you're at the bank with
Yeah,
Dad.
and we're
How
right
old are
behind
you?
Kabuki. I was probably this was 1981, so I was three
Three
or
or four.
four.
So
Yeah.
you're in line at the bank in a car.
Mm-hmm. In our Lincoln, and he's up in front of us in the Kabuki, not the Kabuki, yeah, the Kabuki limited edition Kabuki from Cadillac.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and Kabuki sees, and I think Sonoda's with him, the Magic Draggy, and he sees Dad, and he gets out of the car, and he comes around to talk to Dad, and I start screaming because I'm scared to death, and he's feeling bad. He's like, oh no, why, Jason, calm down, calm down, calm down. I'm still screaming.
Mm.
And that happens a few more times. But then he went back home to Japan, and then he comes back and knocks on the door, and he's got Ultraman action figures and an Ultraman book for me.
Oh yeah, I remember
So
that.
he gives it to me, and my mom goes, give him a hug. And I go, it's like, okay, he's my friend now. So I
Yeah.
was cool with Song after that. But a great guy, wonderful guy.
Yeah, I just remember sitting at the kitchen table with him, and he was wearing like a tan or beige dickie.
And yeah, you could always tell when the Japanese guys were over at the house because you'd come home and there'd be shoes,
On the front door.
yeah, at the front door. It's like, okay, Japanese guys are here.
Yeah.
You know.
We were just sitting at the kitchen table, and he's like right here, and I'm like 2 years old or like 3 years old, like scared to death of him. He was so quiet.
Yeah, when the Japanese came over, they'd always leave their shoes out front. That's how come you never knew that Kevin Von Erich was over at the house because he didn't wear shoes. He couldn't leave them
Right.
out front.
Yeah.
But no, I think Uncle Donald and Kabuki were Dad's best gimmicks. I mean, I'm giving Uncle Mark the Maniac thing but Uncle Mark was already a big name by that point in time anyway. But he did tell me a long time ago that he had never worked. Uncle Mark, Mark Lewin had never worked heel in Houston. He'd always been a babyface there, and he came back as a heel. He goes, remember before we went out, Dad grabbed me. He goes, show him how to be the maniac. He was off and running after that. So little tweak type things. They've given Abby the hood over his head. Take it off. You go crazy. Little things like that for already established guys. When it's an established guy, you don't really got to do much.
Remember Abdullah used to bathe, like take a shower, and so he'd get in the shower.
Yeah.
And he'd bring like a folding chair, and he would sit down to shower.
And then after he'd get out of the shower, he'd take the folding chair and hit somebody with it.
Yeah.
That's just what I remember him doing it. No, a great guy.
Yeah.
You used to always call, if he liked you, if Abdullah liked you, he'd call you champ. Because Andre used to call guys boss, but it was, hey champ, hey champ, hey champ, how you doing, champ? We just ended up calling him Uncle Butch.
Yeah, he liked you. Like I guess I was quiet.
No, he liked you too.
I know, but I just remember he kind of like took a liking to you.
Yeah, well, I was more talkative,
Yeah.
as if people who've watched these segments can already tell.
Yeah.
Remember, we used to take I used to try to find stuff to wrap up in tape. That way he could use it. Like
Oh
during
yeah,
the
that's
match.
right. Yeah, we'd give it to Dad. Like,
Yeah, it's like here. And then one time I think I broke something off a wooden chair. I don't know what gave me that idea, Brody. And I taped it up in tape, and I told Dad, I said, here, give this to Abby so we can use it. So Dad comes back home the next night. I said, so did Abby use the thing? He goes, yeah. I said, what happened? Dad goes, it busted the guy open. I said, great. Dad goes, I was very, very disappointed.